Hey guys, welcome back to The Outfit. If you are new to the channel, my partner and I are touring Australia. We are full-time overlanders and we are currently filming YouTube videos as well. We usually do 2 videos a week. If you're keen on seeing our adventures, check out our vlogs. That'll also be on this channel. Alright, so wanted to do a video today on basically all of our filming gear, getting lots and lots of questions regarding our drone footage and camera angles and whatnot. So first of all, before we get started, basically if you are wanting to film a YouTube channel on the road or anything like that, you're going to want to have some way of charging all of your camera equipment, your batteries, your laptops for editing, etc. while driving. You don't want to have to stop and charge everything, right? So what you're going to need is you're going to need a pure sine wave inverter. I'm not going to go too much into detail on that one. I'll do a separate video on the charging gear. But that basically turns your 12 volt DC car battery into 240 volt AC power, so basically the same as if you plugged it in at home. So first of all, when it comes just to vlogging, we try and keep it really simple. We don't want to be setting up microphones, lapels. We don't want any fluffy dead cats on cameras or anything like that, because we just know that's going to really slow us down in the long run, and we don't want to make what we're doing too much of a chore, if you can kind of get my drift. So we've actually opted for the GoPro Hero 8 Black, which Ange is filming right now. The audio is pretty good. I mean, it's not spectacular, but as action cams go, we're very happy with it, and that is the main reason we've gone the GoPro over the DJI Osmo Action, which is actually a little bit cheaper and has a front-facing camera. Now, we've used our phones in the past, and I often find when you can see yourself on the camera, it almost makes you kind of second guess yourself. So you're almost like, Angel, for instance, look at her hair, or something will be out of place. So we actually prefer not having a front-facing camera, because you're just looking at the lens and you just assume everything's fine. So that's actually, in my opinion, better to not have a front-facing camera for vlogging. That's just us. Now, if you're following our adventures, you'll know that we've recently gone through 2 brand new GoPro Hero 8s, and that was in the water, not diving deep at all, just snorkeling depth. Both of them ended up getting water ingress completely randomly and for no particular reason. So we learnt our lesson, and we've gone and bought a GoPro Super Suit, which is a protective underwater housing, and that means you can dive to 60 meters. We've been using it for a few weeks now, and it seems to be great. So we should have got that earlier. If you are diving with your GoPro or even snorkeling, don't trust the waterproofing capabilities of it. It says you can go down to 10 meters diving and it's fully waterproof. That's not true for the ones that we had anyway. This is the GoPro we would sometimes use just for filming stuff on the Jeep, but recently I've snapped the GoPro mount, so that's useless, so I'll end up chucking that. So we're down to 1 action camera. An upgrade in the future would be having a second one, so that if I'm in the water I can film spearfishing, and for instance Ange could be vlogging on the beach. So that'll be something we want to upgrade in the future. Now, some of the benefits of the GoPro are A, it's incredibly light, and it's really annoying lugging around a camera, especially if you're holding it at your face, for instance. You want something really light. So the GoPro's got that in the bag. And secondly, it's got what's called Hyper Smooth 2.0, and that basically is inbuilt stabilization, and it works really well. I'll massively notice the difference when I go to like a GoPro or another action camera that doesn't have it. It's super shaky, and you need to keep it incredibly still. So that's been a game changer for us. Now, I know you can buy attachments for this new GoPro Hero 8 Black now, microphone, things like that. Looked at lots of reviews online. So far, I can't see the reward for the amount of money being spent. The only thing the GoPro doesn't work well with is when wind is directly hitting the microphone. It'll distort the sound, or you'll just hear that sort of noise. At the moment, as an action camera, we're kind of dealing with it. If you know of any other solutions or suggestions, let us know in the comments. Okay, so next on the list is what we actually film with. So this will be our B-roll sequences when we shoot forward driving clips of the Jeep. I'm running a Sony A7R III. really nice little camera, which I really like. So it is mirrorless. So there's now no longer a big mirror slapping back and forth when you're taking photos. What I was running before that was a Canon 7D Mark II, which is a phenomenal camera and still relatively small, but it was a lot heavier than this one. So I like the small form factor of mirrorless cameras, and they've come a really long way now. This was the top Sony one at the time. It by no means has to be, that was just my personal preference, but any decent mirrorless camera will do you really, really well, and it saves you having to lug around a big heavy DSLR. Onto the lens. So before I was using all my Canon glass. Now they don't really work together. Sony and Canon don't really work. What happens is you need an adapter to make them basically fit together, and then all of the autofocus capabilities don't actually function. So what we were actually doing is filming in manual focus and manually pulling focus on all of our shots. It was really tricky, and especially with Ange being brand new to video, it was a hard way to try and teach her how to do it. Now I've recently moved to a 35mm prime lens. A prime lens means it's a fixed focal length, so I cannot zoom or anything like that. But 35mm on a full frame camera, I think is a really, really good mid-ground. I'm sacrificing a few things, but I'm gaining a really small amount of weight and a really nice aperture. So this goes down to f1.8. If you know anything about lenses or cameras, I'm happy to talk to I'm blue in the face about it, but I won't go too much into detail here. But it basically means you can separate your subject from the background, or even sometimes foreground if you've got that in shot, and you can create what's called bokeh, which is basically the really nice, silky smooth, like dreamy out of focus effect that you can make the background, and that basically makes things look much more professional and just nice, basically nice to work with, nice to look at. So that's what we're running for all of that stuff. Now sometimes when I can be bothered, I will put that Sony on this Zhiyun Weebill S, which is a stabilizer. So the GoPro has that built in. Larger modern professional cameras don't. So this one is very small in comparison to most gimbals, but it's still another thing we've got to lug around. It's another thing that's got to be set up, even though it is quite fast. And it's another thing that takes a lot of practice. I haven't had this for that long, and although I really like the effects I can get with it, I really need to practice it because it's still not silky smooth like it could be, and I'm sure there's a lot more I could be doing with this, but I don't pull it out that often just for some B-roll scenes or occasionally on the Jeep. What's really nice is that you can walk with it with the camera on top, and it will still stay relatively nice and smooth. That's something you cannot do if you're just walking with a professional camera. Now when we are filming ourselves, so a few of our sequences where we've chucked the Sony on a tripod and we are filming ourselves talking to the camera, that'll be when we use a directional microphone. Also haven't had this for that long. It was an investment I really wanted to make to try and up our audio quality. Overall very disappointed with it. If there is any wind, although it cuts out that harsh hissing noise against the microphone, rather it actually just drops audio levels hugely, so you can still tell when it's really windy. It'll also pick up sounds miles and miles away if they are behind the person because it is directional. And overall I think it makes the sound quality very unrealistic. And that's one of the reasons why I don't like using a microphone and the GoPro sounds fine, because you can get all of the stuff that's going on around, the bird noises, the insects, things like that, which I really like, and I think they add to the feel of the audio. This completely removes that and only takes audio from where it is pointing at. So it's something that we may not even keep forever, and that would be something where I think probably a wireless lapel system would work better. So that would be where you've got the little microphone like a news presenter will have on your shirt. But in my opinion, that's just not practical for when we're doing our daily vlogs, only when we're sitting down. Now, what I didn't mention just before with this little 35mm prime is that what's really changed the game as well is having a circular neutral density filter. And that also acts as a polarizer as well. Now, what a neutral density filter does is it darkens the image, and that means you can run a more optimum shutter speed without it being completely blown out. So that works really well if you've got the sun in the shot. The only downside of that is sometimes when you've got a nice blue horizon, parts of the image will be almost like an unnaturally dark area, and that's because of the polarizer. But overall, for shooting video, and I'll talk more about photo, that works really, really well. So I do highly recommend getting a polarizer that's easy to use. All we've got to do is turn it depending on which situation we're in, and that works really, really well. Now, before video was my main focus, I was a very keen still photographer. Not the best, but definitely very keen. When I'm shooting landscapes, which I don't do as many anymore, I use a large wide angle lens. This is my old 16 to 35 millimeter f2.8 Canon lens. This has had a heap of use. It's an old battle axe really. And that's usually in manual focus. And this I will use for all of my landscapes, for my starscapes. I won't shoot people with it, and I very rarely will shoot the Jeep. Because it's a very wide angle lens on a full frame camera, the front of the image will distort. So therefore, a little bit like a fisheye. So therefore the tire on the car, for instance, will be a weird oval shape, or it'll just be much, much larger than the other tires in the rest of the shot. And that just looks really strange, and I really dislike the look of it. So that only gets taken out on some still photos, so not much use anymore. Where I would like to upgrade my setup would be getting a long lens, something like a 70 to 200 millimeter. And that's really, really nice for bringing the background closer into the shot. It compresses the image. Whereas with a wide angle lens, the background becomes tiny. So you can have some huge, beautiful mountains in the background. And on a wide angle lens, they will shrink into nothingness. And really the foreground is the only thing in sort of the epicenter of the shot. I also like to be able to pull mountains forward and create layers and depth, but you can only really achieve that with a longer lens. That'll be something I want to get in the future. Now, I won't touch on this too much because it's a bit beyond this video, but I also have a bunch of neutral density filters and polarizers. I'm running the old school Lee system, which is an English brand. And I've been using this for many years now. But basically, this does the same job that this tiny little one does here, but it's for a wide angle lens. So we've got a circular polarizer, and then behind it, a neutral density filter. Now, what that means for still photography is that I can lengthen out the time of the photo so it lets more light into the picture without it being blown out and looking like a nuclear explosion. The benefit of that is that I can turn water into being really silky smooth. I can really make the stars pop on a very dark night sky, and I can make clouds become a nice dreamlike effect. So that's where that comes into play, but I won't talk too much more about that on this video here. Feel free to hit me up with any questions if you're interested in that. I'm by no means a professional photographer. It's just something that I've taught myself and that I really get quite a lot of enjoyment out of. Now, just briefly touching on tripods. I've run through a lot of tripods in the past, and what you want is something really sturdy, but not too heavy. So in my opinion, carbon fiber, not the legs that snap. I prefer the circular ones because they're much quicker, they don't break. This is a Ben Road tripod, and I've been very, very happy with it. It's not too light and flimsy, so that a big gust of wind won't move a long lens, for instance. So that's really nice and sturdy. And then what we normally run with the GoPro is this little Joby Gorilla Pod, which is pretty handy because it acts a bit like a spider's legs, and you can wrap them around trees. We can take it in the water, things like that. So that's had a huge amount of use. It's starting to be a little bit worse for wear, so we may even buy another one of those in the near future. And now moving on to batteries. Very briefly, if you are shooting content, always make sure you've got backups of a lot of things. So we've always got a second fully charged GoPro battery because they don't last that long. You don't want to have to stop mid-recording and try and then charge a battery. I've got an extra Sony battery, and then we've got extra drone batteries, which I'll now touch on the drone. All right, and now finally moving on to the drone, which I'm sure a lot of you are here to see. Now we are running a DJI Mavic Pro 2. It is an absolute little weapon. We really, really like it. It's just so good for getting a different perspective, something that you wouldn't be able to capture unless you're up in a helicopter, which is too expensive for us. It's been really, really easy and simple to learn on. It's a great little aircraft to fly around. It does very, very well in high wind. In fact, it'll go up in really big wind gusts and you won't even be able to tell. So that's been exceptional. It's got a really nice long battery life, and its image quality is really exceptional. And it's also not too big. So it goes down to a very small package. As you can see, we can carry it all in here. Before that, we were using the original DJI Mavic Air, which was even smaller, but it didn't have some of the features that this one does. So it had like a lower battery life. It wasn't as good in the wind, and its image quality wasn't quite as good. When deciding on a drone, if you are going to buy one, all you really need to do is just decide what you're going to use it for. You don't have to buy the newest, most expensive one because it may just be overkill for what you need it for. Now, if you're going for hikes in through the mountains and stuff, get the smaller Air because it is remarkably light. Just be aware that its battery life won't be as long and it won't deal as well in strong winds. Now, what we're running on this is similar to with the cameras. It's all about the filters. So, as you'll see here, there's a circular polarizing neutral density filter on it. They are done by a company called Polar Pro, and they just come in this neat little case here. So we've got an ND 4, 8, and 16. And that means we can fly it in broad daylight when it's super, super sunny, and it enables us to keep that shutter speed to the point where we can get smooth footage without the sky being blown out. So sometimes we could even use more than a 16, so that might be something we'll upgrade in the future. But that is something you definitely, if you're spending all the money on the drone, just spend a couple of $100 more, maybe even less, on some high quality filters for it, because we use these each and every time the drone goes up. In fact, the only time we won't use a filter on the lens is if it is first thing in the morning or last thing at night, when it would make it a little bit too dark. As I said before, we've got 3 batteries. That's really important with the drone as well. Don't just get a drone with 1 battery. You're always going to need more than that, and they do take a while to charge. So we use all 3 almost every time we are filming an episode. Sometimes we'll use 3 in a day because you just never know what you're going to try and film. For instance, if it's whales, you got to fly it 2 kilometers out to sea, try and get the shot you want, and then fly it back, and that's definitely a full battery use. So I hope that's answered some questions for what we're actually doing with our setup. It's pretty simple in comparison to most professional videographers and photographers. It's probably pretty amateur, to be fair, but it's working for us. If you think we could really benefit from something else or should do something else a little bit differently, we would love to know in the comments. We're always open to suggestions. And for us, video is a huge learning curve. It's something we haven't done before this YouTube channel. So please feel free to just give me a hard time in the comments or give us some feedback. We would love to hear it. What Ange is going to touch on in the next video is more about filming and editing and compiling YouTube videos on the road, and she's going to go into the editing process for photos as well. So if that's something you're keen on, stay tuned for the next video. Thanks for watching. If you got something out of it, please give us a subscribe because it really helps this new channel, and flick it a thumbs up if you're keen. Cheers.